All right. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Managing Leave in the Time of COVID-19. If you've joined a lot of our webinars recently, you know that that obviously COVID-19 has been a hot topic for us here and covering a lot of different areas as it relates to that. And so today we really wanted to focus on leave and what that looks like. Some of this will be a little bit of a refresher, and I'll get into the agenda in just a second. Some of this will be a little bit of a refresher at first on what we've previously covered around the CARES Act, just as a little bit of a reminder on the various aspects of that. But really what we want to focus on today, and I'm joined by our awesome partner, Adam Rice from Sedgwick, to really go through specifically how Sedgwick has been handling these leave items and making sure that everything is running smoothly for you as the client. So it's all Encompass clients today. Welcome. If you don't know me, I'm guessing most of you do, but if not, quick intro. I'm Andy Terrell. I'm the VP of Client Experience. Here at the Encompass Group, I've been here for about 5 years, work very closely with all of our clients, just making sure that you're having a great experience. That's my goal in working with you. As I mentioned, I'm joined today by Adam Rice. A lot of you are probably familiar with Adam Rice as well. He's a great partner with us and has been working with us for a few years now. So if you're not familiar, I'll let Adam do a quick intro before I jump into the agenda. So Adam, did you want to do a quick intro?
Thanks so much, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Andy said, we're going to be going over some of the claims handling procedures we put in place, especially as it pertains to the FFCRA and COVID-19. A little background on myself. As Andy said, I've been partnering with the Encompass Group and their clients for the last few years. I'm sure that I've dealt directly with at least a very few of you. And normally I act in support to the client experience team and making sure that all of the programs for the Encompass clients are running exactly as expected. A little background
Excellent.
as far as how long I've been with Sedgwick. Oh, sorry about that, Andy.
No, go. Sorry.
I've been with Sedgwick for almost 10 years now, both in the workers' compensation and leave of absence space. And I won't talk your ear off anymore about my history, and we can get right into the agenda.
All I know is that you've been a great expert, so we'll highlight there. So for today's purposes, a couple of housekeeping items. If you've joined these webinars previously, you will recall that we place everyone on mute just because we cover a lot of great content, and I know everyone's working from home. So if you're similar to me, you have some background noise occasionally. So we want to make sure that everyone gets to hear all the content as much as possible. With that, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, your Ring Central screen. Please feel free to ping those questions over as we go through. Some of them I might pause Adam as he presents today and have him kind of address those as we go along if it's a clarifying question. But we'll definitely have time today at the end of the presentation to make sure that we address those. And then anything that we potentially don't go through, or if you want to ask more specifically, you can always reach out to your client experience manager with the Encompass Group. So quick overview of today's agenda before I hand the reins over to Adam. So as I mentioned, we're going to do a little bit of a refresher just to make sure that, everything's still top of mind, as I'm sure it is, just of the FFCRA as it pertains to both the FMLA and EPSLA. So Adam will do just a quick refresher for us on what that looks like. From there, he'll go ahead and jump into the FFCRA and the COVID-19 claims handling as it pertains to Sedgwick and what they've put in place to ensure compliance as much as possible, streamline as much as possible, and efficiencies for our clients. We'll go through some managing leave reasons. Again, most of you are probably familiar with what we've done and set up in Exponent HR for you, but just a quick refresher on that as well to make sure that we are aligning what we're placing in Sedgwick with what's going to be an Exponent. Again, a little bit more of an overview about what a furlough layoff and reduction in force looks like and how that plays into your claims handling. So if you do go through that furlough or that layoff, or if you do a reduction in force, what that looks like, particularly as it pertains to leave. General emergency claims handling, and then of course some questions at the end. So again, I'm not going to take away too much from Adam's time today. I'll let him jump right into his excellent content. Again, feel free to ping those questions through on the Q&A as we go through today. So I'll go ahead and mute myself and let you take it away, Adam.
Thanks, Andy. So as Andy said earlier, first we're going to be going over a little bit of a high-level overview of the FFCRA. And again, I'm sure that all of you have hopefully taken advantage of the Encompass Group's excellent webinars that they put on over the last few weeks, where they really took an in-depth look at the FFCRA and how it applies to each of you. But again, today, just a quick high-level overview. So the FFCRA consists of two portions that were effective as of April 1st, the first being Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act. So really what this is expanding the FMLA protection for the additional leave reason of an employee being unable to work or telework to care for their child if the child's school or place of care has been closed or is unavailable. So this does add that protection to the standard bank of FMLA hours, meaning that this isn't a separate bank of 12 weeks, it is the existing bank and will draw down FMLA as per normal. There's also a paid component around the EFMLA, and while the time will all be tracked under the EFMLA by Sedgwick and would be available for you via the employee portal, which hopefully you've all utilized in the past and are familiar with that, the paid portion is not something that we will directly be working with or interacting with from a leave administration standpoint. Just kind of a graphic representation of what the EFMLA and the EPSLA, which we'll get into in just a moment, looks like. So for the EFMLA, we do have that 10-day waiting period that's going to be unpaid. And then after that, the paid portion at 2/3 of the regular rate of pay, up to $200 per day or $10,000 over the total leave period, then applies. Now, again, from the Sedgwick perspective, you'll see that as one leave under EFMLA in the client portal. So you will be able to see that time tracked. And the EPSLA, you see there at the bottom, and that is the paid leave component bank of 80 hours that we'll touch on here in a moment. Although, again, that is not something that Sedgwick interacts directly with for the leave process. So a little more detail around the EPSLA. So again, I'm sure that you have heard quite a bit about this over the last month. Really, the most important portion of the EPSLA is that it's 80 hours of paid time for an employee. Although when caring for a family member, it is worth noting that the sick leave is paid at 2/3 the employee's regular rate. And you'll also see on the bottom couple of sentences there that when it comes to part-time employees, they're only entitled to the number of hours that the employee works on average over a 2-week period. Okay, so here's where we're really getting into what we as Sedgwick have put in place to manage claims around COVID-19 and specifically EFMLA. So for EFMLA, we are not requiring certification when an employee calls in and requests this. So we're going to approve the leave based on the employee verbalizing the need for the leave. And they will tell us that the child's school or care provider is closed or unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19. So you'll see there in the bottom bullets what we're going to be verbally obtaining and documenting, which again will be available in the employer portal. And that's going to be the name of the employee, the dates for which the leave is requested, the reason for leave, the statement from the employee, which they're going to be confirming the inability to work because of the leave reasons applicable to the EFMLA, the name of the school, place of childcare, or childcare provider that's become unavailable, and again, a statement that no other suitable person is available to care for the employee's child. So that information is all going to be available in the employee portal, and we'll touch on a little bit later where to find that. So this is the a couple screenshots of the client portal. So this is where you would go when you're actually looking for the information and the documentation around the EFMLA. So again, hopefully all of you have had experience with the portal in the past. If not, I'm more than happy to send out a user guide, which can walk you through quite a bit of the portal itself and where to find things. But in general, you're going to go in and you're going to look up a claim under the employee's name or claim number if you have it available. And once you do so, that's going to create a list of claims at the bottom of the screen. And by clicking on the claim itself, you'll be able to create a drop down and you'll be looking for the notes section. The notes section is going to have a specific note around intake that's going to document all the bullet points that we just went over. And it's going to have all of the employees' answers to those questions documented. So again, that's something that you'll have access to at any time. And truly, it can be viewed as the system of record and the case file for anything that you might require.
And I was just going to say, this is Andy. So if you have any questions, most of you that are on the call today should have access to the portal already. If not, please let us know. Reach out to your client experience manager, because again, this will be super useful for you to be able to track this information and pull this information. Again, we'll talk about how we're tracking in Explain HR here in just a few minutes. But just for today's purposes, in regard to the Sedgwick portal, again, if you're unfamiliar or haven't really worked in the portal, just ping your client experience manager. We're happy to walk you through this and call this out, but really we just wanted to show you where you could find that. So so the couple questions have come in. Can we, as the HR administrator, file the initial FMLA or EFMLA through the Sedgwick portal?
Through the portal, no. It's our preference that the individual employee contact us directly, but just as a general guideline around, for instance, FMLA, if the employee is unable to because they are, for instance, hospitalized and unable to call in the claim, then you would be able to reach out directly and initiate that claim on their behalf. That was best done via the call center or through contacting the claims team directly, although obviously with the Encompass Group and our unique relationship, I would certainly advise that you go through your client experience manager.
Alrighty. Back to you, Adam.
Thank you. All right, now for quarantine related to one's own serious health condition. All right, this is going to still fall under the FMLA. So again, the EFMLA is just really an extension of the FMLA protection for that one specific leave reason. So if we do receive claims for quarantine, the absence is going to be tracked under FMLA. And assuming the eligibility requirements are met, which are the standard eligibility requirements of hours worked and time with you as the employer, we're going to approve up to 14 days without requiring documentation. Obviously, due to the current pandemic, accessing a physician is not always immediately realistic. And so we are allowing up to 14 days of leave to be approved without requiring that documentation. For quarantine, we're obviously only approving leaves on a continuous basis. Wouldn't make sense to have an intermittent leave where you're quarantining yourself for a day and then going into the office. And this really is true of all FMLA claims, but that last bullet point, existing intermittent claims cannot be used for COVID-19 related absences. They can only be utilized for the conditions for which they are approved. And again, that's true across the board for FMLA. You, for instance, could not have an employee utilize time for a migraine if they had a claim where they were taking time out for recovery from surgery.
So we've kind of talked through where that's managed in the Sedgwick portal. So for today's purposes, also talking through a little bit about where you can find this information within the Exponent HR platform. So Exponent HR for both leave items, so the EPSLA and the EFMLA. For the EPSLA, they've created global codes, essentially is what we'll call them, related to the sick leave and the sick leave 2/3. So if a lot of our clients I know have already activated those codes and are actively using them. If you have not, maybe you haven't experienced this, or maybe you're over 500 employees. I know we have a few clients on the line today who are over 500, so you might not have activated this because, as Adam mentioned, it's 500 or under. You can always activate those if anything changes or you need them in the future. Feel free to reach out to your client experience manager to help you with that, but essentially it's under the company codes and you would just go in and activate it. It's already set up for you. It's set up to be open for the employees to enter that information themselves and enter those leave reasons themselves, but you can always edit that to be payroll adjustments only if you want to have a little more control over that. Track notes, as we mentioned earlier, so Sedgwick manages the EFMLA portion, so the item related to FMLA. These initial 80 hours are for those that can be utilized for those first 10 days that might not be paid, or if they don't need to be on the EFMLA as a whole. So just making sure that they're selecting the right reason and that you're tracking that information in Exponent HR for record keeping for those credits associated to that. We've covered that quite a bit in some of our other CARES presentations. So feel free, if you have questions, those we can always refer you back to those or send a link to you. But just making sure that we're tracking those codes in Exponent HR. And then as it pertains to the EFMLA, any leave, as Adam mentioned, in Sedgwick, they'll track the leave reasons and the total hours that are going towards that and tracking that information. But also you can have that FMLA code in there under that's FMLA childcare for the FFCRA. And then also we've created, if you need it or would like it, we can also create a leave reason code for you. So when you place an employee on leave in Exponent HR, we can also create a leave reason code for you that mentions the FFCRA. But again, you'd be paying them through Exponent HR for that leave related to the EFMLA. So again, if you have any questions about how this looks in Exponent HR or where to activate those codes or how the earning code works, feel free to reach out. Again, we've touched on this a few times, so we're happy to provide additional resources as it pertains to that. I've had a few questions come in. So Adam, I'm going to ping this back over to you and check in on some of those questions. But yeah, we'll go from there.
Sure. All right. So going right into furloughs, layoffs, and reductions in force, as Andy said previously, I know that you all have had a lot of great guidance around this, so I'll keep this very high level. As a reminder, a furlough is going to involve reducing the days or weeks that an employee works. So a good example of this would be an employee that is going to be taking 1 day off per week at the employer's request, or working only half days, etc. That's going to fall under the purview of furlough. A layoff is actually a temporary termination of employment. Now, in this case, the employer believes that this is going to change and that the employee is going to be recalled at some point. Again, it's worth noting in that second bullet point that job protection is not offered. And a reduction in force is similar to a layoff in that it is termination of employment, the difference being that with a reduction in force, there's no intention of replacing the positions, and we are looking at a permanent reduction in headcount. We've put into place some best practices around claims handling, especially as it pertains to furloughs, layoffs, and reductions in force. Obviously, with the current pandemic, this is especially timely. So employees who are currently on a mandated leave, meaning FMLA or a state leave, in the event of a furlough, a layoff, or reduction in force, how is that going to be handled? So in accordance with FMLA, If an employee is furloughed or impacted by a workplace closure, that time is not going to be counted against their leave entitlement. Obviously, they are not able to work since they would not be allowed to by the employer. So that time is not going to be drawn down from their FMLA bank. Requests for leave that come in after a furlough or a workplace closure, generally speaking, and again, this bullet speaks to this, employees are not going to be eligible for their leave to begin during a furlough or workplace closure. Now, with modified work schedules, obviously that's not going to be the case. If someone is applying for a continuous leave and they are currently being furloughed to the point of perhaps a 32-hour work week, we would still draw down that time. It just wouldn't be the normal 40 hours a week. For requests for leave after a layoff or a reduction in force, so once an employee is terminated, they're no longer going to be entitled to FMLA or that state mandated leave. Now, as an example, when we were developing this presentation, Andy had a terrific question around, for instance, an employee who is already out on leave for either, again, surgery recovery, pregnancy, et cetera, and their department is then furloughed and how that would be handled. And the answer, again, is that leave, while it will be paused, that time during the furlough or during the layoff would not be deducted from their FMLA banks. So again, the real guiding principle here is with regard to furloughs, reductions in force, et cetera, and employees who are already on leave, is just to treat them as you would any other member of the department and not really utilize that fact that they are currently on leave to guide you about whether or not you should place them on furlough, et cetera.
Yeah, and Adam, a question just came in related to that. I know other questions have come in, but just to clarify, since we just covered this. So the question is, can we lay off employees who are currently out on FMLA leave? And if so, would we only count the time they were out before we laid them off?
So I don't want to get too in-depth into specifics, but again, in general, if you're looking at laying off an employee that's already on leave and you're laying off, for instance, an entire location, an entire department, then that is probably going to be more acceptable versus someone being singled out. But I would highly recommend, before laying off or anything that involves actual termination of employment, contacting either your client experience manager so we can discuss it with Sedgwick and bring in our compliance department before doing so. That would probably be the best guidance I could give, because for any specific circumstance, you're really going to want to make sure that it's been vetted before moving to termination.
Yeah. And so to clarify, if the compliance does say lay them off because you're laying off that entire department, or that entire location is closing, or whatever it might be, then yes, the leave would only count up until the day of the layoff. They would not be still considered at leave at that point, moving forward. So they would have to be active and work to be done, as Adam mentioned earlier. But again, kind of the example that he was talking about is just making sure consistency is key in these situations, that, you're not necessarily singling out someone who's on leave right now to furlough, saying, oh, well, we don't have to pay them leave, and let's go ahead and lay that person off who's on maternity leave right now. Keeping it consistent and making sure that you are doing best practice the way you would as if COVID-19 wasn't going on. You wouldn't just fire someone who was currently on leave. But again, if you're looking at an entire department or an entire location that's closing, then that's a different situation. So each case is going to be very specific. And so this is an instance where please feel free to loop in your client experience manager. As Adam mentioned, they have a compliance team that can help with this as it pertains to making sure that you're not running into any issues, because you probably did already have employees who are on leave and what that looks like. So just keeping that in mind. Hopefully that answered your question in regard to that. If not, we can definitely continue that conversation. But in short, if you do furlough them, or if they are laid off and there's no work, then yes, it would only count up until there. Awesome. A couple other questions again come through. We'll save a couple of those towards the end, but that one was a clarifying one, so I went ahead and jumped in. So, Adam, I'll shoot that back to you.
All right, terrific. All right, so going into a little bit of the claims handling around the furlough layoff and reduction in force. So again, around furloughed employees, if an employee has been directed that they're not going to be performing any work and their work location is still open, we're not going to decrement any time from during that furlough period. So if we're looking at a temporary furlough of, for instance, a couple of weeks, it's important that Sedgwick knows both the employees that are going to be involved and the begin date of that furlough and the end date of that furlough. And one of the main reasons being, we will then pause the claim. So how that's going to actually be managed is that the disability claims specialist is going to call the employee and advise them that we're going to be pausing their claim and to encourage them to keep us informed when they're returning to work. And then once the furlough actually ends, assuming the return to work date is after the end of the furlough that's been communicated to us, the claim just starts right back up. Now, obviously, if an employee is going to return to work during the furlough period, then again, the claim would not obviously restart. So we spoke to this a little bit earlier, but that second bullet point, for employees who are going to be working modified schedules, the claim is going to remain open. The difference is going to be that the time is not going to decrement at the same rate. So for instance, if a location has been furloughed to a reduced schedule of 20 hours per week as opposed to 40, the employee would only see 20 hours out of their bank each week as opposed to the standard 40. Now for workplace closures, the claims are going to remain open, but again, time will not count against entitlement. So, and again, this bullet speaks to this, but maintaining a skeleton crew is considered a location closure for this purpose. So we also speak to working with the Encompass Client Experience Manager to provide location information associated with the closure. I cannot stress enough how important that is. Obviously, we need to make sure that time is being decremented or not decremented appropriately. And working with your client experience manager and in turn with Sedgwick is the best way to make sure that that's happening. And that final bullet point, again, just right on the face of it, if we're looking at a layoff or reduction in force, if an employee is part of that, then all claims are going to be closed and no further time to be decremented as they're no longer an employee. Finally, these are emergency claims handling procedures that have been put in place across the board for Sedgwick, both for the mid-market space, which is Legacy York, and Sedgwick Legacy, that is the jumbo market. We have put into place kind of an efficient, streamlined process just during the pandemic, and these claims handling procedures are open to change and are being revisited once every couple of weeks. So there are going to be updates around this. I believe we're actually looking at making a couple of updates to this within the next week or so as we kind of plateau in the current pandemic. But currently, we're managing claims with approving time requested or 30 days, whichever is earlier. And with the medical certification provided, we're going to use that for our initial decision. Then we're going to follow our existing process. Now, for existing claims or ongoing claims, if the expected return to work occurs during this period, we are going to pursue return to work as standard. If the employee is able to return to work, however, we're not going to require a fitness for duty certification. And if the employee is unable to return to work, we're going to provide a 30-day extension. Obviously, if medical is provided, we're going to use that for the decision. We are not going to directly advise the employee that we're not seeking medical certification, and we're not currently going to be seeking recertification for excessive usage or end of benefit. Now, excessive usage, that refers to an employee going over the approved frequency and duration of a claim. So that's something that we have paused only for, again, the current pandemic period, and expect these to slowly move back towards our standard process, probably in a stepped manner. And again, I would look towards those first steps happening in the next week to 2 weeks. Finally, some terrific resources that both Sedgwick and the Department of Labor has. So the first is Sedgwick's blog. And if you click on the news and media link at the top, there are going to be quite a few articles from Sedgwick's leadership, both around compliance, around workplace issues. It really is a terrific resource, so I highly encourage anyone who's interested to go out and take a look at it. And then the Department of Labor has put out a variety of resources around the FFCRA, so that does add quite a bit of clarity if you are seeking any, and there are a few links there at the bottom of the screen that you could follow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So so we'll be sending around this presentation per usual. So this hyperlink that's on here, we'll make sure to provide that to you. Sedgwick has been terrific in keeping this blog up to date on what's going on, and then in general, just terrific with keeping us up to date on any changes that have taken place and any changes in processes that they've needed to put into place given the situation. So please keep an eye out for Encompass updates. Anytime we've been getting some real pertinent information, you probably have already seen a couple in regard to Sedgwick. We make sure to send those out because everything here is super intertwined, as I'm sure you can imagine. So you have the EFMLA, but then also people qualifying for just FMLA as it relates to COVID, two separate items, but still related to COVID-19. And then of course the paid leave. So all intertwined, which is why we thought this topic was so important on how Sedgwick is tracking that information and then how that ties into what you're tracking in Exponent HR for those credits when you are paying either EFMLA or paying those the EPSLA. So again, some great resources. Sedgwick has really stayed on top of it. And as we mentioned before, please reach out to us and we'll loop in Adam or their compliance team if there's specific questions. We realize that this is a lot of information and a lot of things changing very quickly. And then everything's changing again as we've gotten news recently that a lot of places are starting to open back up. And so we just need to make sure that we're keeping you all posted. So, so wrapping up today, Adam, did you have any final notes? We have a couple of questions that came in, so I'll address these last couple of questions, but any kind of closing notes real quick before I jump into this?
Of course, just thanking everyone for attending today. And again, I would highly recommend anyone with any further questions, especially around compliance issues, definitely reach out to your client experience manager. Obviously work with them very closely, and we can loop in our compliance team as needed.
Awesome. So of course this is Encompass clients, so you're all familiar with what we've been working on and what we've been focusing on. Next set of webinars coming very soon, so keep an eye out for both Encompass updates as well as webinar updates. We'll continue to host these until you tell us to stop, which hopefully will never happen, right? For more information, reach out to your client experience manager. This is approved credit for SHRM activity ID. I will be able to send that over to you at the end of today's presentation, so you'll get that via email. So I'll make sure to get that over to you. It is approved for 1 hour towards recertification. So now's the time. So we were very efficient and thorough today with trying to get through, I know, a lot of data very quickly, but hopefully pretty straightforward for you. We've had a couple of questions come in, so I'll address those, but now's the time. If you have more questions, shoot them over. We'll address them. So one of the questions is the paid 10 weeks to the employee under the EFMLA paid through the state or by the employer. So this is paid by the employer, but this is eligible for the credit that we've talked about earlier in regard to both the EPSLA and the EFMLA. So initially paid by the employer, but able to be credited again for those employers under 500. So again, we have a lot of great content that we've been producing related to that, and also happy to schedule some additional time with you to answer some specific questions as it pertains to the CARES Act. And then another question to clarify: if an employee goes out for the 14-day quarantine, then we code that under FMLA. Adam, you want to take that one?
Correct. From our end, it would be coded under FMLA for the leave.
Right. So the EFMLA is only related to childcare, but they would still, in this instance, be eligible for FMLA, again, case by case for some of these situations, but in general, the answer is yes. So any other questions for today? I haven't seen anything else come in. Some great questions that did come through though, so thank you. But any other questions? All right. Well, I want to say a very genuine thank you to Adam for coming on today and providing some excellent information for us. Again, Sedgwick's been a great partner of ours for many years, and we look forward to continued partnership with them and you. We'll be posting this and sending this webinar out to everyone, as well as that SHRM credit, so be on the lookout for that. And again, be on the lookout for more webinars coming very soon. Thank you so much for everyone's time today. I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.